Diagram below shows gold atoms being bombarded with alpha particles. So these are your alpha particles, and they're being uh, shot right at these gold atoms, this very thin foil of gold. This is Rutherford's gold foil experiment. Let's take a look at what part A is asking. The large yellow spheres represent gold atoms. Right? What do the small gray spheres represent? So these gray spheres are the nucleus. That's all it's asking us. Let's go to part B. List at least two characteristics of the nucleus, which are the small gray spheres. Let's list at least two. Let's list them all. All right, so they're very small in region. So let's say small, or they take up very little space. So a small volume, you could say. We know that because most of these alpha particles went right through, which means most of the atom is just empty space. So the nucleus is very small. It also has most of the mass, small region. Let's do that. Contains most of the mass of an atom, most of the mass. So we have a quantity here. It's called density, where we can relate mass, the ratio of mass over volume. So if the mass is, if the nucleus has most of the mass and it's a very, very tiny space, we can say it has it's a very high dense area. It's a very dense area, or high density. All right, what else do we know? We know that's where the protons are, so it's a positive charge. That region is. All right, so let's move on to part C. Which subatomic particle, switch up the color here, which subatomic, so we learned cannot be found. All right, so Rutherford's Professor J.J. Thomson, discovered the electron. So the electrons are not in the nucleus, we know that. Electrons, which we abbreviate like that. And so let's describe them real quick here. They're very small particles, but actually the space that they occupy, so it's a little different. Okay, so they occupy most of the space in an atom. They're not big particles, that's not what we're saying, but they occupy most of the space or volume. All right, and because the nucleus contains most of the mass, the electrons have very small mass. Small mass, right? And we know the charges are, magnitude of the charges of the electrons and protons are the same, and J.J. Thomson found the charge to mass ratio, and turns out the electron is almost 2,000 times smaller than the atom. So very small mass, very large volume. We can therefore say that region, not the electron itself, but that region that the electrons make up, is a very low density. Right? Why? Why? Because again, the mass is very low, and the volume occupied, the space occupied by the electrons, are very, very high. Now, electrons are very tiny particles, but the space that they occupy is most of the atom. All right.